It seems that the childhood of Leo Tolstoy, the heir of a rich, noble family, was happy and carefree. He lived in the luxurious Yasnaya Polyana, a large estate surrounded by gardens, fields, and forests. It would seem that the boy had everything: wealth, servants, education. But Tolstoy himself recalled his childhood years as empty and lonely. Why so? When Leo was only 9 years old, he lost both parents. First his mother died, and 4 years later, his father. The boy's upbringing was taken up by distant relatives. Tolstoy said that despite all this external care, he felt abandoned and unimportant. The children's room full of toys seemed empty to him, and dinners at the big table resembled cold formalities where there was no room for sincere emotions. His grandmother had once said that the children of the nobility must grow up strong to rule the country. But Lev did not feel strong. He began to seek solace in books and writing. At the age of 15, he wrote his first manuscript, in which he tried to express his thoughts about the world and man. But this attempt ended tragically. One of the servants who happened to find his notebook decided it was dangerous thoughts and burned it in the furnace. Imagine what it was like for a teenager to lose his first creation. Tolstoy's childhood years taught him two important things. First, he realized that money and comfort do not make a person happy. This feeling of emptiness he carried through his life, and it became one of the reasons for his later rejection of wealth. Second, he realized that even when surrounded by loved ones, one can be lonely. But that was only the beginning. As Leo grew up, he tried to build a life that would compensate for his losses. He began to actively participate in the life of his estate, writing and searching for answers to his questions. But why did Tolstoy decide one day to give away his lands and give up everything he had, despite the fierce opposition of his family? Leo Tolstoy in his youth was a man of extremes. He simultaneously managed a huge fortune, sought inspiration in literature, and managed to lose a fortune in cards. After the death of his parents, Tolstoy inherited Yasnaya Polyana and became the owner not only of the land but also of the lives of hundreds of peasants. He had about 400 hectares of land at his disposal, an area equal to almost 600 soccer fields. Young Tolstoy did not immediately find his place. He tried to be an exemplary landowner, but he struggled with discipline. He hired about 200 peasants to work in the fields, while he himself spent his time traveling, socializing, and military campaigns. At the time, he believed that a man of his level should live beautifully, surround himself with the finest things, and receive guests with largesse. But behind this picture of success, there was another side. Tolstoy was a passionate gambler. In his 30s, he was so addicted to gambling that he lost large sums. Some debts he had to pay with land or income from the estate. One day, after another loss, he swore he would never pick up a card again. And that was the first of his abrupt departures from the life he had become accustomed to. Later, as his worldview changed, Tolstoy began to view his peasants differently. He saw their hard lives and felt guilty that his wealth was based on their labor. Tolstoy gave away some of his land to the peasants for free, an unheard-of act for a 19th-century nobleman. What could make one of the richest men of his time give away all his property and give up his income? Leo Tolstoy was not only a famous writer, but also a man who shocked society with his actions. His renunciation of wealth was a turning point not only in his life but also in the history of Russian culture. By the age of 40, Tolstoy began to feel a strong inner crisis. He had achieved everything that many people dream of: wealth, fame, family, literary recognition. But it did not bring him happiness. He began to question, why live if the ultimate goal of life, death? Tolstoy became fascinated with religion, philosophy, and ideas of equality. He began to argue that nobility and wealth destroy the human soul. To live an honest life, he decided to give up what he considered his privilege, land, income, and status. His most notorious act was his refusal to accept royalties for his later works. The novels Resurrection and Anna Karenina could have brought Tolstoy huge sums of money, but he declared that literature should be available to everyone and allowed his books to be published for free. Tolstoy lost millions of rubles that could have provided not only for him, but also for several generations of his family. Tolstoy's decision to give away money and property led to a sharp conflict with his wife, Sofia Andreevna. She was adamantly opposed to her husband disinheriting the family. Sofia was afraid that their children would end up in poverty. At that time, Tolstoy was so carried away by his ideas that he sometimes left the family without money for food, giving it to the poor. Sofia called his actions madness. It would seem that Leo Tolstoy, a world-famous writer who lived in a beautiful estate with a loving wife and children, should have been a happy man. But behind the facade of his success lurked a real drama. His radical views on wealth and life led to deep disagreements with his family. The conflict reached such heights that it ended in a shocking escape and threats of tragedy. Sofia Andreevna, Tolstoy's wife, lived with him for more than 40 years. She was not just a companion, but an assistant. She transcribed manuscripts, took care of the affairs of the estate, and brought up their 13 children. But when Tolstoy decided to give up his wealth, Sofia was shocked. For her, it was all incomprehensible and unfair. She could not understand why her husband wanted to disinherit their children and distribute property to the poor. Sofia even called his ideas betrayal of the family. Quarrels in the Tolstoys' house became a daily reality. Once Sofia, in despair, threatened to drown herself in a pond near Yasnaya Polyana if her husband did not abandon his plans. This incident shocked even Tolstoy himself, but he remained true to his convictions. By the age of 82, the conflict between the spouses had escalated to such an extent that Leo Tolstoy ran away from home. He did not tell anyone where he was going and took with him only the most necessary things. The writer dreamed of living the rest of his life in poverty, away from the bustle and family disputes. His escape caused a real scandal. Newspapers throughout Russia wrote about the rebellion of the great writer. After the scandalous escape from home, Tolstoy settled in a village house at his friend's house. He avoided attention, but he was recognized everywhere. People wrote him letters, came to him for advice, and newspapers did not stop following his every move. Tolstoy wanted to get away from fame and fortune, but they pursued him to the end. Even in poverty, he remained a symbol and idol of millions. In November 1910, already sick and tired, Tolstoy went on another trip. At the station, Ostapovo, he felt bad and had to stay there. In the cold room of the railroad chief, he spent his last days. During his illness, journalists and admirers came to the station, and the whole country followed the events. Tolstoy died on November 20th, 1910. Before his death, he asked to be buried simply, without ceremony, in a clearing in the forest near Yasnaya Polyana. His last request was fulfilled. Thousands of people came to Tolstoy's funeral, although it was hardly ever publicly reported. Because of his views on religion, Tolstoy was excommunicated from the Orthodox Church. Even after his death, it did not recognize him as Orthodox, despite public pressure. This became one of the loudest scandals of the time. Tolstoy proved that even in old age, a person is able to change his life and go against social norms. However, his example shows that ideals can make a person lonely, even if he is surrounded by crowds of admirers. Leo Tolstoy left a legacy not only as a great writer, but also as a man who chose to fight his own selfishness for the sake of higher ideals.